Hey there, it's Scott, StartATherapyPractice.com. Hope you're having a great day. I'm fixing to go out here and work in the garden because here at my house, it's a glorious day. So, on top of all that's going on with COVID and just the crazy state of affairs, my state Medicaid decided to drop a hefty audit on my clinics to audit the paperwork that we're doing for the services that we're billing our state Medicaid. And we bill a nice chunk of change to our state Medicaid. Now, in the past, and maybe you've listened to a previous episode of mine where I explained that Medicaid in my state has, in the past, just showed up at my clinic unannounced and said, hey, we're here for 3 days and we're going to scan every bit of paperwork that you have in your clinic and we're going to audit you. And I told this story before that I asked them, I said, well, do y'all usually give any heads up when y'all do this? And they said, well, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Basically deal with it. So I had to give them a room in our small practice, in my small clinic, for them to camp out for 3 days. Now that was in the past. That's been many, many years ago. And this year they couldn't show up at my clinic because of COVID. So I guess that's the COVID bonus right there for this Medicaid audit. They had to do it electronically. Now, I bring this up because if you're new to private practice, or even if you've been around for a while, there's some things that you need to keep as far as paperwork, correspondence, information about your practice, about the people who work in your practice, and about the patients that you see through your practice. You can't just get rid of paperwork. And even if you thought you could get rid of paperwork or not necessarily store it in a very good fashion for your employees, maybe therapists that you hire, you got to keep all that stuff. So I want to keep you out of trouble. So I'm going to go over a few things that you absolutely want to keep and how I store those, how I keep those, because guess what? Computers crash, don't they? And you maybe you don't want piles and piles of actual paper cluttering up your office, your home, wherever. So I've got a handy dandy notebook right here. This is my handy dandy notebook, if you've ever watched Blue's Clues. So on my handy dandy notebook, I have written down, keep everything. Even if you don't think you need it, keep it. Now, I use a Brother printer fax scanner. I actually have it right here beside me. So this is actually a Brother MFC L2710DW Special Jalopy. I mean, it is slick. It's actually not that slick. I mean, you can get it for a couple $100. I got mine on Amazon, and Brother laser printers are just really good. I mean, I have a Brother laser printer at one of my clinics that I bought when we first opened back in 2006, and that thing still works like a charm. So I like Brother laser printers, but they're good for scanning things too. So scan everything and save it on a computer, save it on a backup. I save mine to the cloud, and I use Dropbox for that. And then I use a program called Sookasa, Sookasa. Sookasa makes anything I drop in my Dropbox HIPAA compliant. It's a security software. And there's different versions of that. Sookasa works with Dropbox. It works with Google, the Google Cloud also, and some other backup softwares. There's and I'll put some links down below to this. There's another option that escapes from me right now. It seems like it's called Box, but I'll put a link down below. That way you can, and it's a little bit cheaper, I think, too. But I like Dropbox. Dropbox has all kinds of different features in there. So here's some information that I keep. I keep everything about a patient. Anything that we ever get, progress notes, evaluation reports. Obviously, you want to keep those, prescriptions. But anything, I keep anything and everything on a patient. Now, it gets a little more tricky because maybe you didn't think about this. If you're hiring therapists, you need some paperwork in place when you hire therapists. And the members of my Academy of Private Practice actually get my paperwork when hiring. They can just use it as a template. So if you're interested in becoming a member of the Academy of Private Practice, go over to startatherapypractice.com/academy, which this reminds me, I want you to, if you're just starting out in private practice, or maybe you're just thinking about having a private practice, I have a monthly webinar. It's a free webinar on how to start a therapy practice. So go over to startatherapypractice.com/webinars, and you can sign up for this month's free webinar on how to start a therapy practice. Now, what's really cool about that webinar is I give away a super duper free resource handout that only those who attend my webinar get to have. Now, you have to attend the webinar live. I don't record it. So I want you to actually show up for the webinar. And if you miss it, don't worry. I have one every month. Sometimes I do 2 a month. I did 2 in July. So startatherapypractice.com/webinars to register for that. Now, back to what you need to be saving for a potential audit. This reminds me that if some insurances require that you have a prescription, some insurances don't. Also, you may or you may not live in a direct access state. So that's the terminology, direct access. Basically, that means you don't need a doctor's prescription to do your job. Every state should be a direct access state. This is just common sense to me. You're a therapist. You don't need a prescription from a doctor, but I don't make the rules. They don't ask me. So if you're not sure if you live in a direct access state, go to whoever licensed you as a therapist and ask them, do I need a prescription from a doctor to do my job? Are we a direct access state? And if you're not, then maybe you need to help out your licensing agency or your state therapy organization to move some legislation to make you a direct access provider where you don't need a prescription from a doctor. That would be pretty cool. I'm in a direct access state. So things you want to keep. Of course, for patients, you want to keep everything you can. For therapists that you hire, you want to make sure you keep all their licenses. So this audit that Medicaid is doing for us is from last year. So if I would have said, you know what, I don't need this license from this therapist because it's old. This is an old license from last year. Why do I need that? I just need the current license for this therapist. No, not so quick. You need all those licenses. So I have a therapist who has worked on and off for us since 2007. I have all of her licenses. I have them all saved in Dropbox. They're backed up to the cloud. If my computer crashes, I still have them. So you want all those licenses. You want all of the liability insurance for your employees, for your therapist. And sometimes therapists have multiple licenses. Speech therapists are notorious for this. They have a state license and a national license. Now, me as an occupational therapist, I have a state license and I have NBCOT license. So I have 2 licenses. PTs, maybe not so much. But anyway, save all the license that a therapist might have all through the years that they work for you. And anything else you can think of, you want to keep. You want to keep that. You want to back it up. You want to save it and be sure that you have access to it. Now, you also want to make sure that those records are secured, which is why I said I use Dropbox wrapped up in Sookasa. But if you have just hard copy files, you want to make sure that that file cabinet is lockable. You want to make sure it has a little key on there that you can lock that, because guess what? When Medicaid dropped in physically to my clinic, they said, hey, where's the files kept? And this was back in the day when we still had paper files, and I still have some paper files. I said, it's in that file cabinet right there, and it's locked because there's a key to it. And they said, good. Got to have those locked up. So be sure to do that. And I think that's, I know another thing I wanted to tell you is that when you correspond with someone who's going to audit you, or they just need paperwork about a patient, you want to make sure that first of all, that's a secure email on the other side from where you're sending it. And also, you want to send what's called a read receipt. In other words, you have proof that they opened the email and they read it. So when Medicaid audited me here recently, they said, okay, we're going to email you what paperwork we need. Well, they did email me, but I didn't know who the email was going to be from. In other words, I didn't have the exact email address that it was coming from. And when they emailed me, I went the next day to look for that email and it wasn't there. And I was like, I know they would have emailed me. So I did a search, I used Gmail. I did a search for the words Medicaid, didn't come up. I did a search for the word audit and the email didn't come up. And I was like, well, that's strange. So every day I kept going back in there searching Medicaid audit and nothing was showing up. So finally, Medicaid called me back. And this is another good point. If you actually talk to somebody and they call you, That's important. Take their name down, write down the day and the time that they called you, and make sure that you have a good phone number for them. I didn't have a good phone number for these people, so I was trying to track them down by phone number, and guess what? They don't always know. One department in Medicaid or insurance doesn't know what the other department in that same company is doing. They didn't know who to send me to. Pretty inefficient. So when they called me back, I said, oh, I'm so glad you called because I've been looking for your email. You haven't sent it. Well, they said, Mr. Harmon, we have sent you the email. And I said, well, I didn't get it. So she went in there and looked, and she said, well, sure enough, the email has not been opened. So they were using some software that would tell them if I had actually read the email. And I said, no, I would have opened it. We would have already had this done. And so she sent me the email, and I said, who's the email coming from this time? That way I knew who to look for. Well, sure enough, here comes the email, and I did a search using that same who the email was from, and there was the previous email. And so I read it, and nowhere in the email, subject line or body, did it say Medicaid or did it say audit. So I contacted Medicaid back, and I said, here's the issue why I didn't get this. I didn't know who it was from, first of all. And the subject line said something along the lines of package delivery or something like that. And I was like, this just looks like spam to me. It doesn't say Medicaid anywhere. It doesn't say audit anywhere. And I told them that, and they said, oh, okay, yeah, no big deal. Just let's start from ground zero here, start fresh, and work on the Medicaid audit from here. So hopefully they learned something from that. You can't send out an audit and not even put the word Medicaid or audit in the email. That's just crazy. So a lot of times when they request paperwork, any of these funding sources, they're going to have a case number or some sort of identifying number, because they're all about databases, and databases are all about numbers. Reference that number in every correspondence that you send to these funding sources. So I did that on every email. I just created like a template of what I wanted to say in the subject and in the body. That way it had that reference number, it had our provider number, it had the dates of service, and I just reproduced that every time. That way, to make their job a little bit easier and to make sure that that information got to who it needed to go to, and they could reference it. So I think that's about all. Yeah, I'm looking at my handy dandy notebook here. I think that's about all for that. But I would love to know your experiences with an audit, either for Medicaid or private insurance or Medicare or whatever. Leave a comment down below and say, hey, Scott, yeah, I've been through this audit scenario, and it was a nightmare because of, and you're filling in the blank. My audit nightmare. And put a comment down below. I'd love to hear about that. Don't forget about the free webinar, startatherapypractice.com/webinars. If you're interested in becoming an Academy member, and that's going to help you with mentoring from me. Lessons are included in the Academy of Private Practice, and it's all about community also with the other practice owners over there. Go over to startatherapypractice.com/academy. If you need anything, let me know, and Godspeed to you and your practice.